Oh, hi. Come on in.
Alright, welcome to my living room, which is also my critical listening space for audio work. This here is my studio assistant. Her name is 80s. Over here is where my computer is typically at most of the time when I'm working on audio projects. And back there is my newly acquired Midas MR18 digital mixer. This thing is great. I can put in up to 16 microphones of input and use it for bands, or like with the recent Importance of Being Earnest production that First City Players did. Now back here is the rest of my hi-fi gear, and as you can see back there, that's my 18-inch subwoofer. And on the other side of this couch, I have a little 8-inch subwoofer, and together this gives me a very even distribution of bass response at the listening position. Once again, that's the couch where I do a lot of my audio work on, along with my dog. Ain't she a cutie? Now up front, I have a pair of bookshelf speakers which I built myself, and they are able to reproduce frequencies from down low all the way up past human hearing. Now at the mixing position, you can see that I've got this beautiful view looking out the window, and I think it's a great relief to have, especially after looking at a monitor for hours at a time. Especially on days like this when I get this beautiful golden light filling up the scene ahead of me. What a treat to have. Now let's check out some of the cameras I've got. This here is my Sony a7R II, and this is the camera I use a lot for my nighttime photographs, which happens to take great videos. This here is my backup camera. It's a Sony NEX6. It's a pretty old camera by now, but it works.
Okay. Now that you guys have seen some of the tools that I use to capture a video recording or even just an audio performance, as well as the equipment I have in my home studio to accurately listen and monitor what's going on in terms of video and audio, let's talk about the actual process of post-processing the media that I've captured. So here in this screen capture, you can see that I have this software called Davinci Resolve open. And Davinci Resolve is a professional level video editing suite. It is known as a non-linear editor. Right. So now that we have the video footage as well as the audio recorded and brought into the media pool here, we now need to do several things. Firstly, you can see how my captured video looks very flat and almost devoid of life and color. Now that's because my camera has the ability to shoot in a logarithmic exposure profile. So the whole reason we have the logarithmic exposure profile in prosumer and professional level video cameras is to allow for a digital video camera to capture as much dynamic range in a scene as possible. Now, what do we mean by dynamic range in video recordings? Now, if we look at this video scene here, we can see that on this stage, we have areas that are very well illuminated and very well lit, like the talent here on stage. Some of the brightest regions would be Dale Curtis's white shirt over here. So this is the very brightest part of the video footage. And on the other end of the spectrum, on the other end of the dynamic range, is the shadow region. And shadow region would include this part here by the grand piano, this dark area underneath the music stand, Dave Kiefer's leg. You know, in lower end video cameras that have less ability to capture dynamic range, this whole region here would tend to blend together as a solid black zone. On the other side of the stage, you know, this area where the auxiliary percussion is, as well as the couch, you can see how it's not as well illuminated as the rest of the stage. And in, you know, lower end cameras or even cell phone cameras, this whole area here would just be rendered as a dark shadow with very little detail. Now, how do I go from this to something that looks a little more colorful like this little preview here? This is where applying lookup tables come in handy. Now, you guys won't be able to see what I'm doing here because for some reason my window capture software is not able to capture my right clicks. But I'm right now navigating through some menus after right clicking, and I am going to apply a Sony S-Log 2 to Rec 709 profile. And Rec 709 is a color profile used in HD TVs as well as home theater projectors. So you can see after applying the lookup table, what the software has done is to assign certain contrast and color values to certain regions within the exposed dynamic range. In a nutshell, I'm willing to admit that I myself am not too well versed enough in it to explain beyond that, but this is basically what is happening. Now that the video footage looks about where we want it to be, punchy, contrasty, and full of color and life, next what needs to happen is the video and the audio need to be brought in together in the editing window and synchronized. Otherwise, what could happen is the audio could run out of sync and it'll look like the guy is talking before his lips even move, for example. Or in this case, you might hear a drum solo when there isn't one, visually speaking. Here we are in the edit window, and admittedly, at least to me, since I'm not a very proficient video guy, I'm primarily a stills photographer, the video editing aspect is the most tedious and time-consuming part of it, admittedly speaking. So, suffice to say, I've put in quite a bit of time to put the video in sequence and edit them, as well as ensure that the audio tracks are in sync. So we'll audition real quick to make sure Austin Hayes' drum solo synchronizes with the video. Very good. Now that the video and audio clips are in sync, next we'll move on to my favorite part of the process, at least because I'm big on audio as well. And as I've realized, Davinci Resolve's audio module known as Fairlight is pretty robust. I gotta admit that I'm pretty impressed. So here we see the audio track, and you can see that it is very spiky. So there are some loud parts and there are some soft parts. And this looks good to me. So like with capturing video in a logarithmic exposure profile, the audio recording here has also managed to capture as much dynamic range as possible. And in audio, the dynamic range would refer to the loudest parts of the music, like drum hits or claps, like that, which would be the loudest part of the audio, and the softest part of the audio, which could possibly be Chaz Gist, for example, playing underneath the melody section to support the music with his bass line. So having captured the very loudest and the softest part of the audio, I now have the flexibility to massage its tone in a way that would sound pleasing either on cell phone speakers, on earbuds, or on big, expensive hi-fi speakers. So here you can see on the right side, I have certain audio tools that are currently disabled. This is so that you guys can hear how the audio sounds as it were captured. As I have the audio playing through, I will re-enable these tools so that you can hear the subtle changes leading up to the final product that you guys have probably seen or enjoy on my YouTube channel. So this song is titled All of Me. As you listen through, you might recognize the chorus, and feel free to just hum along because it's a pretty fun song. Very cool. So that was the saxophone solo. That was the bass solo. And that's the drum solo. Now, as you guys were listening through the various clips earlier, you might have noticed certain things. At least to me, what I've noticed during the saxophone solo, for example, the saxophone sounded very far forward in the mix, while everyone else, like the guitars, the bassist, and the drums, sounded like they were pushed further back in the mix. And even though this isn't a multi-track recording session or mixing session, I'm still able to exert some level of control by means of a multi-band compressor. So with this multi-band compressor, I can affect the dynamics of different frequency ranges, as you can see here. So I can compress the low bass region differently to the mid bass region, and I can also affect the compression dynamics of the mids relative to the highs. So let's play back the saxophone solo and hear how it sounds once the multi-band compressor is enabled. Very cool. So as you probably can hear, especially if you were to listen to this video on earbuds or your Bluetooth speaker, you will find that with the multi-band compressor enabled, it sets the soloist back into the music a little bit more, which gives me the ability to raise the rest of the music up so that the music still sounds full while the soloist is still clearly audible and can be differentiated from the mix. So that's the multi-band compressor. Next, we'll move on to the equalizer. Cool. So without the equalizer, you might notice how the bass guitar might sound a little rounder, a little more woolly, or even tubby. And that frequency range is usually around the 150 to 300 hertz region. So personally, I don't like too much of this frequency region because, it could obscure the definition of a plucked bass guitar, for example, or a kick drum could overwhelm everything else if there's too much of this frequency here. And that's why you can see that I have dipped it a little bit. What I can do is I can play it through and I can boost it and cut it back, and you can hear the difference. So this is what the equalizer does. It allows me to shape and massage the tone of the stereo mix so that it sounds a little more balanced. Next, I have the compressor, and this allows me to reduce the overall dynamic range of the recording. This is so that as you're listening to the bass solo on your phone, you wouldn't have to crank the volume all the way up, and then when we get to the drum solo, it becomes way too loud and things start distorting, and we don't want distortion. So let's hear how it sounds without the compressor from the softest part to the drum solo. Right, let's enable the compressor now. And that's the goal of what I'm doing here. I'm trying to make very subtle changes to very gently massage the tonality of the stereo mix towards where I like it. I don't want to make too drastic of a change. So now that we're done with these tools here, next we'll move on to the reviber. And what this tool is a vitalizer, as we call it. Some vitalizers would phase align certain frequencies so that they sound cleaner, in a nutshell. And this allows me to give me some more shimmer and polish in the high frequencies and give me more oomph in the bass without overloading your stereo system, so to speak. So I'm not really boosting the treble and boosting the bass. It's just achieving that effect in a different manner, so to speak. So let's listen to it without for now, and then with the vitalizer. Now let's listen to the same region with the vitalizer on. Cool. So I'm hoping that you might be able to notice how the top end of the frequency range has a bit more shimmer, has a bit more shine, as the knob suggests, and that the low frequency sounds a little fuller without sounding too round and bloated, figuratively speaking, of course. Then finally, we have the limiter. And what the limiter does is it allows me to maximize the audio's loudness without crossing a certain threshold. So this way, I can make it louder sounding without the audio going into red. And as you can see up here in this top right corner, I have the loudness meter as well. So the goal is for the integrated number to be no more than -1. Because if it goes into a positive number, YouTube, for example, or Spotify, would end up turning the audio level down, and we don't want that. Cool, let's turn the limiter on. So, in a nutshell, a limiter is just a slight variant of a compressor. So this way, the mix can sound as loud and full as possible without distorting or without triggering YouTube's algorithm to reduce the overall audio level. So now that we've seen the process it takes to make it sound the way I want it to sound, I'm going to put in a little before and after clip so that you can see and hear the difference before and after processing. Thanks for joining me today on this quick studio tour and checking out what else goes on behind the scenes after the recording is done. I hope you had fun hanging out with me and others today. Hope to see you around. Take care.